Hello, welcome back to another chapter of Planetarium. Let's load the chapter. I weaved through the alleyways, coming to the edge of the buffer zone. I found a 6-story building whose windows had all been broken, and I walked up its floors. The place was completely pillaged, perhaps by the hand of another junker. I entered a room at the top floor and took up position at a waterlogged window. The fiddler crab was still standing motionless at the rift in the quarantine wall, as if it were a simple watchdog. From here, I could easily see the gun turret glinting dully in the rain. If it would stay fixed, then it would not be hittable. At the same time, that meant that I was also within range of those machine guns. The only consolation that I was in a position well short of minimum allowable range of the railgun. I cracked open the barrel of my grenade launcher. I inserted another cartridge. I had chosen on composite, armor-piercing, directed blast AC- grenade set with a 10-meter proximity fuse. This would be able to penetrate the armor of the main cannon, no matter which angle it struck at. But once I fired, I would most definitely be detected. Although I had 2 more AP cartridges left, I did not think it was likely that I would have a second chance if I did not manage to disable the fiddler crab with my first shot. I closed and cocked the grenade launcher and then raised the long-distance sight. I calculated the distance to my target and the ballistic subsidence rate and corrected my aim accordingly. This grenade launcher was equipped with neither tracer functionality nor a ballistic stabilizer. The stopping power of the cartridges and the construction of the gun stock itself were unchanged from the designs of last century. After all, the simpler an armament was, the easier it was to trust it. That was the only rule of social discourse that the unceasing rain had imparted to me. I lowered my head and braced the gun barrel against the window frame and carefully adjusted my aim. The rain was continuing to fall. The wind was intermittently and weakly blowing from left to right across the buffer zone. There was still no indication of movement from my target. The wind kicked up. The muddy water to one side began to ripple like the scales of a fish. I waited for the wind to die down, my fingers still tense on the trigger, and suddenly realized that I was thirsty. Not even the first time when I fought a warmonger so long ago had I felt so nervous. Before I could wonder why, I found myself thinking about her. She was probably standing stock still in the middle of that soaked sidewalk, right around now, in accordance with my order. Even though I had brought her along with me, I had still not thought of what I was going to do with her. It was just that I could picture what would happen to her if other junkers happened upon her later and harvested her. A charging apparatus would be expensive, but not as much as I could never procure it. While it would be difficult to update her software or replace her parts, I could probably at least do some maintenance and minor adjustments for her. For that matter, it might even be possible to procure a small projector for her. Of course, an umbrella-like device with a hemispheric spread would also be necessary for the projection. With those two things, we could travel from settlement to settlement, and with a commentary, we could show people the starry sky. What if I change my profession? We might even be able to reach every place where people still live by the time I die. And in any case, I was sick and tired of being a junker as well.
バカバカしい。
I murmured as I realigned my aim, which had by this point slanted totally askew. That was all just a pipe dream. I must have slipped off into those thoughts because my mind was clouded with fear. They were all just proof that I was starting to think that I couldn't die here. These thoughts didn't feel that bad though. The wind weakened and finally died down from the last faint breaths of a dying old man. The fiddler crab was still aiming its main cannon out of the rift in the wall, waiting for the arrival of enemy mechs.
悪いがな。また相棒ができちまったんだな。
I held my breath and squeezed the trigger. The warhead billowed white smoke as it flew and hit the rear of the fiddler crab's railgun. However, nothing happened. I could see the fiddler crab's from trembling violently, as if it in anger.
Misfire!
I rolled to the side and concealed myself against the wall. I cracked open the barrel of my grenade launcher and removed the empty cartridge. Having expanded due to the heat, the shell fell into a powder and then made a hissing sound. I had 2 cartridges left now. Along with the metallic sound of machine guns firing, material from the ceiling began falling around me. The outer walls of the building were being raked with machine gun fire. An eternity of time seemed to pass before the first fusillade died down. I sprinted and looked out the window on the other end of the room. I quickly swiveled my head and took stock of the situation. The fiddler crab's stance had changed. It had locked its legs and connected the wheels on the undersides of those legs to the ground. It was now entering evasive action. When I leaned forward in order to take aim again, it recommenced its machine gun barrage. The concrete around me, soaked with rain, was so riddled with holes that it was as useless as a sponge when shielding me. If I stayed here, this room itself would soon fall prey to the storm of 13mm rounds. I flattened myself and scrambled toward the stairs inside the building. The rain continued to fall. I tugged onto the sidewalk with my head bowed and strained my ears past the sound of the rain falling. The high-pitched whine of a low-nosed emission motor and the sound of sludge being ground under its well-maintained wheels. Sounds that I heard countless times before, but could by no means ever get used to hearing. My field of vision opened up. There was an abandoned commuter train sitting in the middle of a 2-lane railway line. I concealed myself and took stock of the situation. The fiddler crab was moving rapidly, its forelegs dragging through the mud with ease. Just when I had thought it was going to retreat dozens of meters to the side of the quarantine wall, it suddenly altered its course. It stubbornly refused to abandon the rift in the wall, which it seemed to consider its post. It seemed that it had not recognized that I was a single infantryman and was instead taking random evasive action against an unknown quantity of enemies. A speed of approximately 25 km per hour, quite slow considering that it was running off eternal power. I could tell its sensor, mounted on one side, was scanning for my presence. I already knew. The moment that my first shot had failed to explode, I knew I had lost the gamble. Had I ears that could listen in on high-frequency radio communication, I would probably be hearing the fiddler crab requesting backup from any nearby units right now. Then, in 10 minutes at the soonest, the one human who still breathed in this town would cease to do so. No. In the midst of this unending rain, the order of this dead town would once be frozen into place and my fate would be sealed. I was suppressing the urge to allow a crazy smile to float to my lips. Right. What I had to do still had not changed. I had to silence the fiddler crab as soon as possible. I then had to retrieve her and slip past the quarantine wall. As I adjusted my grip on my gun, I recalled the words of the captain who commanded my training corps. Never stop moving. Always angle in toward the defensive parameter and charge toward without fear. Easy to say and difficult to do. 2 AP rounds left. If at all possible, I would have to close in and first knock out a leg. Then I would have to aim for the armored top and destroy it without fail. I took a deep breath and then leaped into the rain. I ran. Having detected me, the fiddler crab slowed down and entered into a strafing sequence. The proximity sensors had painted me, and the link turrets were swerving in my direction. I sprinted forward, kicking up splashes of mud. The muzzles of the fiddler's guns spit out light. I could see 3 points of red light scanning the ground before me in lieu of tracer bullets. A line of thin water sprouts kicked up before me, trapping me in a transparent cage. The moment I saw that, I changed my attack factor. After a short delay, the sound of machine gun fires rent asunder the sound of the rain falling ahead. A storm of bullets passed through the area that I had stood in just a second ago. It had rectified its aim immediately. I confirmed out of the corner of my eye that the machine gun barrage had stopped for a second. I immediately changed my path even more acutely, planning on doubling back shortly thereafter. It was an old tactic, but an effective one. Because of it, I was able to give it the slip for a second time. At an edge of the buffer zone that stuck out like a bridgehead, I came upon the largely intact shell of a puffing heavy APC. I immediately slid down and used it as cover. I would not have to worry about being hit by even HE rounds from here. As long as I stayed closer than the minimum allowable range, I would be in no danger of being targeted by the fiddler's crab's main ornament, its LERC railgun. I quieted my heavy breathing. The shooting died down. It appeared that my opponent had enough sense to not waste ammunition needlessly. The range between the two of us was a little over 200 meters. Now the hunter would become the hunted. The fiddler crab began a rapid retreat. It was an established tactic to retreat and regroup in case where one did not know the true strength of one's enemy. The gunfire resumed once again. Strange sounds echoed as the machine gun bullets ricocheted off the armor plating of the APC. It would be difficult to hit a moving target with a relatively slow-moving, high-explosive round from a grenade launcher. have no choice but to time the motion of my opponent and lead a shot accordingly. I knew that I was becoming agitated. The blood in my body ran cold and my senses were rapidly sharpening. I suddenly wondered, was she watching? I wanted to tell her that this was what hunting was all about. A ritual of continued bloodshed that mankind had enacted over and over again since the dawn of its history in order to survive. Even though we had once extended our reach into the vastness of space, nothing had really changed. Mankind had now even created for itself game to hunt and had equipped itself with fangs it had not by design been given. The rain continued to fall. Intermittently, shining tracer lights around the nearby emplacements. The fiddler crab continued its evasive action. I angled my grenade launcher obliquely. I pictured the position of the fiddler crab 5 seconds from now. I used my gun sight to target that area, as if I was sticking a pushpin through it. I muttered as I counted the tree. I pressed the trigger. The canister drew an arc of white smoke in the air. The fiddler crab was in the very place I needed it to be, as if we had choreographed our actions. I had scored direct hits on the unarmored foot, hip joint of its right hind leg. And after several dreadfully tense seconds, a burst of flames bloomed on the fiddler crab. With a thunderous roar, the fiddler crab came to a precarious halt, as if it were going to fall forward. Its huge form inclined slowly. The ventral ammunition container fell from the fiddler crab like a rotten fruit with a crash and an explosion. Yes. Having lost its joints, the fiddler crab's frame groaned in an multi-layered cord. I may have let out a sound that was neither a cheer nor a scream at that point. The fiddler crab was severely wounded, but it wasn't dead. Its composite armor plates were trembling in anger like a proud old knight. The main battery, which had fallen greatly askew, reared to life and started to track towards me. I watched this all occur as if it were happening in a world far removed from mine. My field of vision disappeared in a storm of pure white. The thunderous sound of metal grinding assaulted my eardrums. A delayed blast shockwave scattered raindrops everywhere in a boisterous dance similar to a storm at sea. The wind whipped about me and my nose was filled with the smell of burning ozone. The next moment, my body flipped into the mud as if it had been thrown by a gigantic hand. A mad buzzing filled my ears. I was blinded and couldn't move my legs. They felt as heavy as they had been cast out of lead. I fumbled around and found that fragments of rubber had toppled over and now blanketed, oh no, my thighs. I twisted my body about and somehow managed to extract myself. Unlike my body, which wouldn't move dexterities at all, my head was swarming with activity. Just now, the fiddler crab had aimed in my direction and fired its main cannon. The slug had veered sharply upward and struck a building instead of me. It was an attack pattern that couldn't have possibly existed not against a single infantryman at point-blank range. I tried to move out of the immediate vicinity. If it were running off internal power, then it would take 25 seconds for the LERC on the type LE to be fully recharged. If I didn't move now, then with the next shot, the building would collapse on top of me. As I made to retreat, I realized that I had no sensation in my right leg. It seemed that it was broken. Both my eyes and my feet now, As a dull pain began to creep up from my leg, I started to laugh. Even now, the rain still continued to fall. And now, I finally understood the situation. So that thing was broken as well. Embraced in the arms of an unending rain, that mechanized monstrosity of a spearman was still dreaming. Dreaming of the gentle city that it was charged to protect, and of the mighty enemies that it was charged to destroy. I could hear a sound reminiscent of a thundercloud crackling. Its condenser coils were charging. For my part, I could hear the sound of things underfoot and the echoes arising thereof. My eyes could not open, as if they had been run through with splinters. The hood of my waterproof cloak had been ripped off, so I could feel fragments of concrete falling on me directly overhead. No, these were drops of rain. The rain was simply continuing to fall as if not a single thing had changed. I had absolutely no idea where I was. I was probably several meters from my starting point, but I didn't know anything other than that. One of my feet got stuck on something and I tumbled to the ground. My grenade launcher rolled from my hands. The inside of my mouth was cut, and I could taste lukewarm blood spreading out from within. The figure crab let out a shriek. I collapsed on the ground as fragments of concrete and glass pelted my waterproof cloak like many tiny bullets. It had hit a building that was very close to me. All I could do was to cover my head with my arms and endure it. A few large fragments hit me directly on my back. I could feel the warmth of blood soaking my undergarments and crevices of my skin. So I too was breaking down in the midst of this rain. There was no pain. The only thing that it was incredibly difficult to breathe. I need more than this, and I wouldn't be able to take a single step further. Even if my eyes were shut, it was easy to tell where the fiddler crab was just by the sound. The 3 remaining legs would not be strong enough to absorb the recoil of the LERC. Every single time it moved, it was destroying its own frame by itself. Every single time it moved, the outcry of warped metal and shredded carbon fiber resonated dissonantly in the air. These sounds were nothing other than its death agony. It's gone mad, I muttered, as if someone else could hear my words. Just what had gone mad? Was it this battle mech, which had lost itself in anger that it was burying everything around it, including the city that it was supposed to protect, without regard to friend or foe? Or was it this sarcophagus city, which had ceased to function so long ago, and in which now only lived the rain? and the memories of those who had once inhabited it. Or perhaps he was laughing. Beyond the rain-soaked wind, that out-of-order Betterman was laughing shrilly. All of the sounds were distorted and yet very distinctly audible. The figure crab stopped and then assumed a firing stance. Even if its legs were broken, there was no way I could be able to get out of its sight now. Right. This time around it would definitely not miss its enemy. That is, unless it had a silver of reason almost 11 feet. I tried to open my eyes. It was to see for myself the shape of the death that I had been rewarded with. The fiddle crab had stopped moving. She was standing in the middle of the buffer zone. At some point, she had flung off the waterproof cloak that I had given her. With a tender smile on her face, she stood before the gigantic battle mech. It was like a scene from an antique religious painting. Without any hesitation at all, she walked towards the fiddler crab. It was a calm, sure gait, like that one would display when one walked forth to greet an old friend. The fiddler crab appeared bewildered. It had disengaged from firing position and was scanning her with its civilian detection sensors. I forcibly slammed myself back into reality, trying to overcome my paralysis. I only had one chance to destroy it, and it was now. I found the grenade launcher that I had dropped in a puddle. I fumbled to crack open the barrel and finally managed to load it with my last AP cartridge. If I wanted to strike its armor upper surface from ground level, I would have no choice but to fire at a high angle. I did not have the time to adjust my sights either. With my back still plastered to the mud, I eyeballed the distance to the gun turrets and then pointed my grenade launcher at the sky. And then in the span of several seconds, it all happened. The twin machine gun turrets slowly started to revolve as if they had finally decided on something. She simply continued to walk toward the fiddler crab, step by step. I pressed the trigger. The fiddler crab's machine gun splat out flames. The 40mm canister arced through the threatening sky, trailing white fumes behind it. The line of 13mm machine gun rounds kicked up a path of water towards her like a murderous red serpent. The canister hit. I could see the fiddler crab's main cannon seeming to expand. The ammunition bay hatch blew asunder, letting smoke and leaping flames below forth. The fiery serpent continued to track towards her delicate body, as if to eat her alive. And then... No! Her body, torn apart by the bullets, danced in the air like a bird. No, why do you come out, you mammy? The rain continued to fall. The fiddler crab had fallen completely silent, as if it had returned to sanity at its last moment. It had swiveled so that the long barrel of its real gun was pointing toward the rift in the quarantine wall. However, that gun would never fire again. The ammunition inside the main armament had all been induced to explode and black smoke was rising from the crevices in the armor plating. This was a sight that could be seen anywhere in this dead city. It was freezing cold, and my breath frosted white. The widely scattered wreckage was steaming in the rain. I walked forward, pulling my broken leg behind me, and following the bullet marks in the ground, and finally arrived at where she lay. Her shaking lips opened and clearly called to me.
喋れるのか。
はい、緊急作動用電池に切り替えました。お客様、お怪我はございませんか？
俺が戻るまで動くなと言っただろう。なぜこんなバカなことをした？
And just as usual, she smiled. Her fingertips, dirty by the mud, were gently trembling. Underneath fractures in the skin, a dark metallic frame was forlornly exposed.
暴走状態にあると思われる未登録機体に強制停止信号を発信しましたが受講されませんでした。
Why is the voice different?
信号出力が弱い、もしくは受信側に問題が発生していると判断し、物理操作での緊急停止を試みましたが失敗しました。
These were her words, and yet these were not her words.
暴走状態にある機体は現在機能を停止していると思われます。
This was an incantation totally unrelated to the will that had been sealed within the depths of her main memory.
該当する機体から速やかに離れ、最寄りの警察機関、もしくはサポートセンターにご連絡ください。
After she said all of this, she looked over at me once again and blinked as if she was relieved.
収容命令を破ってしまい、申し訳ありませんでした。もっと古い約束事があるものですから、人間に危害を加えたり、人間に危害が及ぶのを看過してはならない。私たちはロボットです。ですからこれは忘れることのできない約束です。これを守ることが私たちロボットの誇りです。
She said that it was her honor. That the instinct that human beings who had never cared about anything other than themselves had embedded into her was an honor.
お客様、お怪我はございませんか？お怪我はございませんか？
ああ、大丈夫だ。
That was all I could manage.
本当に良かったです。
And again she smiled.
お預かりした雨具と花束はあちらの歩道に置いてあります。この道を少しお戻りになればすぐに見つかると思います。
She turned her neck as if to show me the way. Her eyes caught the wreckage of the battle mech.
彼に代わって心よりお詫び申し上げます。きっと彼も壊れていたんだと思います。私たちロボットは人間の皆様の幸せのためにありますから、あのような乱暴なことは本当はしたくなかったんだと思います。私にはわかります。私も少しだけ壊れていますから。
I put my arm around her back just so I could hold her close. She shivered several times as if she was having convulsions. Everything below her chest had been torn asunder by machine gun fire. There was no way to put her back together now. So many precise parts were dispersed throughout the ring, similar to entrails made of metal. It seemed that if I tried to move her even just a little bit, she might never move again. I want to scream. I was just as broken as she was. There was still a squad of warmongers defending these ruins. Now that I had destroyed its vanguard, the remaining warmongers would be swarming toward this location. If I was going to escape, the time was now. But despite this, here I was unable to leave this place.
およそ600秒で緊急作動用電池が残量ゼロになります。
So that's 10 minutes.
バックアップ用電池が消耗しているので、その後は起動不能となります。メンテナンスコールを発信していますが、受講されません。サポートセンターは現在通信不能です。緊急用サテライトコールを発信していますが、中継衛星が見つかりません。少しだけ心細いです。
She says, even just continuing to smile the same as always. She was listening into empty space with her antennas that were no longer of any use. She was calling for aid that would never come no matter what. I found that I was unable to bear watching her do this.
誰も呼ばなくていい。俺が助けてやる。
ですが、
俺が直してやるから。
Blue and white sparks flew as the rain hit the exposed machinery at her chest, now bereft of insulation or lead sheets. As if she were following my gaze, she said with embarrassment,
見苦しくて申し訳ありません。ですが、ご安心ください。私はロボットですから、苦痛を感じることはありません。筐体を修理することもできますし、新しい筐体に交換することもできます。
Yet her tone and her facial expression seemed to me to be in the deepest agony. I already knew that the engineers who would be able to repair her, as well as the new enclosure that she wanted, and even those people who needed her, they were all things that had disappeared from this world so long ago. She smiled and looked up at the rain for some time, and then she turned to face me again.
そのようなお顔をされては、私はとても困ってしまいます。私はロボットです。お客様の笑顔が一番大切です。それなのに、お客様に失礼ばかりしています。
The sound of vertebral motors echoed like beetle whizzing. She bent herself back quietly and then proudly showed me a nameplate glinting in the rain.
ですが、皆さん喜んでくれます。また来るね、ゆめみちゃんと私に言ってくれます。私はみんな覚えています。私はロボットですから、覚えておくのは得意なんです。少しだけお見せしますね。
The lenses installed in both ears began emitting a faint light. This was the holographic videotape playback mechanism that she was so proud of. A spherical screen like a crystal globe coalesced around the breast of her crumbling uniform. The focal axis of the lenses must have been skewed by the gunfire, because I could see the projected images wavering and flickering.
星野ゆめみです。とても素敵な名前をありがとうございます。
Her voice flew from a set of speakers close to her ears. I did a double take and focused as intensely as I could on the image being displayed. There were a lot of people. The projection room was packed with people, and every chair in the room was filled. This scene was one that she had recorded through her own eyes.
一生懸命頑張りますので、どうぞよろしくお願いします。
The entire projection room shook with the sound of applause. Next, a very young girl in long skirt came close up. In her arms, she was holding a bouquet that was about as large as she was.
ゆめみちゃん、はいどうぞ。
The girl stood up on her tiptoes and then presented the bouquet.
ありがとうございます。
And then another thunderously hearty round of applause.
私の就任式です。全部で1263人の方々が私の名前を考えてくださったんです。その中から館長さんとスタッフの皆さんが一つだけ選んでくれたんです。それが星野ゆめみです。私はとても気に入っています。他の1262人の方々がつけてくださった名前もとても気に入っています。
The spherical screen faded and the figure of the young girl vanished. As I frantically strained my eyes, I could see an even thriller scene starting to play. Two people were standing in front of her as if they were getting a souvenir photograph taken.
ゆめみちゃん、綺麗な星をありがとう。今度は友達みんなで来るから、それまで元気でね。
And next, a well-built male customer.
次は結婚記念日に妻を連れてきます。
That was all he said as he gently rubbed her head. And then, an entire sequence of people appeared and vanished.
子供の頃のような素晴らしい星空でした。来年の今日にもきっとロボットさんに会いに行きますね。
星のことがいろいろ分かって面白かったです。夏休みの自由研究にはゆめみちゃんのことを書こうと思います。
めちゃめちゃ綺麗ですっごく感動しました。絶対また来ます。
子供が途中で泣いちゃってごめんなさいね。ほら、ロボットのお姉さんにごめんなさいわ。ゆめみちゃん大好き。
Every single person had words of thanks and a kind smile for her. Every single person promised from the bottom of his or her heart that they would definitely come again.
ありがとうございます。またのお越しを心よりお待ちしています。
No matter how old or of which sex the customer was, she was invariably responded, thus and bowed deeply. That is why this particular projection ended with a close-up view of the floor. These were all her precious, precious memories. They were all maddening visions of a time when the world was still moving in the right direction, when people were still reaching out towards the stars. Again, the image wavered and then shifted into a completely different one. The background of the reception area of the planetarium. It seemed like she was bending over a little. She was engaging two small silhouettes at their level.
お父さんとお母さんの星はどこ？
The silhouette seemingly like a young girl was looking intently into the camera.
お尋ねの星の正式な名前か座標はお分かりになりますか？お父さんとお母さんの星。
The girl fell silent at that.
お父さんとお母さんの星はまだ新しいからゆめみちゃんも知らないんだよ。
The other and slightly larger silhouette answered from the other side. This would have been a little girl and her big brother.
ゆめみちゃん、そうだよね。
はい、 超新星や彗星などが出現した場合は、私のデータベースにはすぐには反映されない場合があります。誠に申し訳ありません。
She again bowed politely.
お父さんとお母さんはマレネタリクスで働いてるんだよ。
マレネタリス。
マレーネクタリスだよ、ネタリクスじゃなくて。
そうですか。とても立派なお仕事ですね。
この前の事故で2人とも死んじゃったんだけど。
The big brothers fell silent with that. I wanted to reach out my hands to them, but my body wouldn't move. The feeling was maddening, for I knew full well these were images captured during a summer 30 years ago. Within that holograph, the big brother and the little sister were still unaware of the true nature of the tragedy that had befallen them. The military invasion of the moon's second port at Planeterium was first announced to the public as a problem with the power reactor. Thousands of people had vanished just like that, and the government concealed the truth with an iron grasp over the media. But even that was nothing more than a prologue for what was to come. Not 1 month after that, war began to ravage the entire Earth.
お父さんとお母さんはお星様になったんだよ。だからお兄ちゃんとここに見に来たの。そうなんですか。今日はご満足いただけましたか？とっても綺麗だった。いつでも見に来てくださいね。イエナさんはとても素晴らしい性能ですから、いつでも綺麗な星をお見せできます。お父さんとお母さんの星につきましてもきちんと調べておきますので。
この次はおじさんに行ってちゃんとお金もらってくる。
ゆめみちゃん、またね。はい、ありがとうございます。またのお越しを心よりお待ちしています。
A clicking sound came from her right ear. The brother and sister rippled like water and vanished, and a different image came into focus. It was the projection room. I could see the silhouette of the projection slanting diagonally in the midst of a dim background. There were 5, maybe 6 adults standing around her. Everyone was holding something in his or her hand. It was obvious that those were the rough gas masks that were in general use during pre-war days.
館長さん、ただいまイエナさんに異常があるようです。
Her voice said,
南天および北天の構成電球が取り付けられていません。次回の投影まであと22分ですので、早急な対処が必要と考えます。
大丈夫だよ、夢見。何も心配することはない。
The silhouette that was standing directly in front of her, perhaps a middle-aged man with black ties. But it was in a voice that made it seem as if he was trying to tell himself the same thing.
ゆめみちゃん、よく聞いてね。
Another voice said, a young woman's voice, it seemed.
私たちね、しばらくみんなで旅行に行くことになったの。はい、ご旅行ですか。それは素晴らしいですね。それでね、ゆめみちゃんには留守番をお願いしたいの。私たちが帰ってくるまでここで待っていてほしいの。
Even from the small tiny speakers of the holovic player, I could tell that the young woman's voice was shaking.
わかりました。皆さんがお戻りになるのはいつでしょう？
She asked, her response not having changed at all from its usual routine. After a short silence, another voice answered her.
まだわからないの。
The image became very slightly slanted. She was cocking her head in doubt as if she would usually do in such circumstances.
それでは皆さんの休暇は無期限ということですか？
そうね。長くなるかもしれないし、すぐに帰ってくるかもしれない。
ご旅行先はどちらでしょう？きっととても楽しいところなのですね。
She probably had that small warm smile on her face as she said this, as if to represent all the members of the staff who had fallen silent. That meant that she called. Mr. Manager now opens his mouth.
いいかい夢見、私たちは必ず戻ってくる。
But they didn't.
誰一人欠けることなく必ずここに戻ってくる。その時はまた一緒に働いてくれ。
はい、館長さん。
She answered clearly.
ゆめみちゃん、またね。
またな。必ずまた会えるから待っててね、夢見。
ゆめみちゃん。
This last staff member was unable to summon any words at all. This employee flung her mask to the ground and swept up the robot in a deep embrace.
こんなのおかしいよ。間違ってる。間違ってるよ。だって置いていけないよ。ゆめみちゃんを置いてくなんて。そんなのできるわけないよ。だってゆめみちゃん、私たちの仲間だよ。友達だよ。私たちの中で一番働き者なんだよ。私たちとゆめみちゃん、何にも違わないよ。ゆめみちゃん、こんなところ置いてけるわけないよ。
私はロボットです。私には休暇は必要ありません。ですが皆さんには休暇は必要だと考えます。
ゆめみちゃん。
The girl broke down crying at that point, tears streaming down her face.
ごめんね、ゆめみちゃん。こんなところに一人ぼっちで。ごめんね。ごめんね。
She broke into a voice filled with so much lament that it was as if her body entire burst asunder from the strain. That feeling propagated outwards and swept all the members of the staff into itself. Understandable. This hologram must have been recorded immediately after the germ bomb bombardment of the major cities of the world. They would now have to flee from this city with just the clothing on their backs and nothing else. They were not permitted to bring any equipment at all along with them.
皆さんはなぜお泣きになっているのでしょう。私はまた何か粗相をしましたでしょうか。重大な間違いをしましたでしょうか。だとしたら本当に申し訳ありません。
ゆめみちゃん、違うの。ただね。
Another somewhat calmer voice, albeit one still filled with tears, answered.
一緒に行けたらいいのにって。ゆめみちゃんと一緒に行けたらきっと楽しいのになって。そんな風にね。
And then, in the same fashion as the other staff member, this voice also grew, choked with tears.
私のことでしたらどうぞお気遣いなく。
She answered brightly as if nothing had changed from usual at all.
私はいつまでも待てますから。イエナさんと一緒にいつまでも待てますから。どうぞ留守は私にお任せください。粗相のないように一生懸命頑張ります。皆さんどうぞ楽しいご旅行を。
I would really like to continue,
29
but I'm
年と
way
71日前の記録です。
I'm way over time, so I'm gonna gonna stop here for now, and we can continue the next time, and that would most likely be the last chapter. Until then, thank you for watching, and please look forward to the